Africa is growing into a sports betting powerhouse, with South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya leading the charge. Legal gambling revenues across the continent is on the rise, reaching an estimated $9 billion. A young and growing population, rapid mobile technology adoption, and shifting consumer habits have all helped fuel the boom. While some researchers even argue that Africa's shared passion for football has opened the door for the betting industry.
If you go into gambling shops, for instance, you'll find out that it is football, the game of football, that is used to market gambling to people.
As sports betting surges in Africa, there's been a mixed bag of some global operators expanding into the country, while others are cautious over the uncertainty of the landscape.
There's still a lot of big, we'll call global operators, who won't touch it. They just find it too messy, too uncertain. But the ones like Super Group, who have done 888 Africa, have kind of moved in, albeit still only a very small number of countries.
Meanwhile, some experts are increasingly concerned about the continent's underdeveloped regulatory systems, especially when compared with more mature markets.
The problem we are currently facing in Africa, and more specifically Kenya, is a lack of support systems, especially when it comes to sports betting.
And it's not just regulation. With many Africans facing economic hardship, the rise in gambling has amplified fears around addiction, particularly in Kenya, now considered Africa's third largest sports betting market.
People in Africa do place bets to be able to put food on the table. And like in the UK and other advanced countries, that is one thing I've noted in Africa, is that people gamble to be able to sustain their lives, which wasn't the real intention of gambling.
Governments are now under pressure to protect vulnerable consumers and ensure operators follow the rules.
We have also commenced a process of harmonizing regulations in Africa so that there can be similarity of the requirements for operators in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and other countries. That way, operators that operate in multiple countries will be having the same requirements across border. So in terms of compliance and protecting consumers, the requirement will be the same.
After a decade of explosive growth, driven by mobile technology, youthful demographic, and a deep love of sport, Africa's betting industry shows no sign of slowing.
Based on what we know with the current regulations, we think it can get to about $15 billion by 2030. We have 5-year forward forecasts, so growing by another 50% or so.
As Africa's sports gambling market continues to grow, the true test of sustainability will be whether various governments can strike the right balance between embracing economic opportunities while shielding citizens from the risks of problem gambling.
And for more, we're now joined by Bloomberg senior Africa reporter, that's Loni Prinsloo, who's also been digging into the story for us. Loni, talk to us about what's behind the recent growth in the gambling industry based on some of the reporting that you and the team have done.
Hi, Jen. Yeah, so as we're seeing basically breakneck growth in the gambling industry in Africa, specifically South Africa, that's making up about 80% of the gambling revenues on the continent. We're seeing, as I said, it's growing by a third every year, mostly through online gambling. So online gambling is now making up 70% of the revenues when it comes to overall gambling. And what is making this growth happen? Basically, it's because of access. So you have a mobile phone in your pocket. Basically, that means that you have the casino in your pocket. You can, there's no big barriers to entry. You don't have to have large sums of money. You don't have to travel to a casino. And then secondly, it's regulation. The regulation on online gambling in South Africa is still very limited. The last time we've seen an amendment to regulation in the country is 10 years ago, so like more than a decade ago. Not for a lack of trying, there's been a few attempts to try and get more regulation in, but it's not happened to date. We are seeing a few movements actually currently now that we'll speak about a bit more.
Yeah, I do want to get to the regulation aspect of it, but just want to talk about, I mean, just the fact that we are seeing growth at breakneck speed sort of makes sense why we're seeing so many big industry players pushing into the continent. What are we seeing? What are some of the names that have stood out to you?
Well, it's the biggest names around, Jen. We've seen Super Group leave a very lucrative industry in the US because of extra regulation, extra taxes, and then coming to South Africa. And within a short amount of time, South Africa became its biggest market. So, I mean, that is one of the bigger players. They have Bedway as a brand. We're seeing Filipino companies eyeing South Africa. DigiPass is apparently coming or trying to get in to South Africa this year. So, yeah, basically, some of the biggest betting companies are looking at South Africa. Once here, the growth is quite rapid.
Quite rapid, and also, as you mentioned, in your pocket, which would make regulating this even more difficult. You mentioned some of the challenges that regulators and politicians have had on it. Walk us through maybe some of the instances where we've seen success and potentially where there's some room for improvement.
So the most recent thing is the National Treasury is proposing additional taxes on the industry of about 20%. There's some unhappiness about that because that sort of leaves the licensed industry people in a worse position while unlicensed people continue unabated. When we say unabated, there's reasons for that. There's limited sort of implementation capacity sometimes. In Gauteng, which is Africa's sort of richest region or the richest province in South Africa, there's only 3 people trying to enforce whether you're licensed or not or any other transgressions. And you can just imagine that's not a lot of people trying to do a whole big online industry where you have licensed and unlicensed operators coming in.